It's Guest Trucks.
It is Guest Trucks. In the trucks we have Mr. James Howell. James, say hello.
Hello!
Oh my god, look at that professional trucks voice right there.
James Howell is someone who I mostly know for his work in games criticism, but he also works in game development, and it should be mentioned, he's one of the very first people in our awareness to have binged trucks. And he just got finished telling us that he did this while grinding a Bloodborne boss, which adds a whole other dimension to that.
Yeah. So I wasn't very good at Bloodborne at first, and I got to the what is the name? I can't. Charnel Road Lane. Charnel.
Hemwick Charnel Lane.
Hemwick Charnel Lane. Yes, I got there, and my skills were not quite up what they needed to be. So I got to the witch boss there, and I just grinded that by helping other people, and I binged the entire first 2 seasons of Trucks, listening to that. So,
which should mean that
Good
our
Lord.
voices are inextricably linked with bloodshed for you.
No. Every time I hear your voice, I think of a bent over witch with eyeballs on her back. Yep.
And the howling noise that particular boss makes when you kill her, I have to imagine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Jesus, you must have been so rich by the end of that.
I was rich, I was powerful, and I was set to defeat my future enemies. And then I got the expansion, and it didn't work out quite as well because that's tougher. But yeah.
So here's the question then. The fact that you needed to do all that grinding rather than get by on skill alone, did that compromise your critical take on that game?
It did not compromise my critical take because I did not develop one.
That's a neat trick.
That's a very.
I just didn't think about it.
Not having opinions is something that people
That's extremely
sometimes
advanced.
struggle with. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's like the negative space of critical thought.
I bet John Blow would have something to say about that.
No, I later once I kind of got in my thumbs, as a way of speaking. Once I got in my thumbs that Bloodborne was like a combination of Dark Souls and God Hand.
Yeah.
Then it made sense, and I was able to start a new character who was able to be a little more scrappy and line upon upgrades. But no, I as much as I've been a huge fan of getting really good at hard games, the From games have never been games that I felt particularly compelled to get what I think of as severely good at.
Rigorously, mercilessly,
Yes.
funlessly good at.
Well, getting good at a game, it's really there's this point where it's the fun sort of it's like you pull the cork and all the fun runs out, and you're just looking at the bottom trying to scry the hieroglyphs of what makes this game work as an object. And recently I went through all 4 of the Uncharted games and beat them on crushing, and then I beat Uncharted 2 on brutal, which is the special custom difficulty they have for the Nathan Drake collection. Those games, and this is true of The Last of Us as well, they just totally fall apart when you're in close quarters. And it's playing those games on those difficulties, it's you have to strategize against the mechanics. It's no longer about finding a way to sort of strategically immerse yourself in the world and then act in a hyper skilled way within it. You're sort of putting your head in the space of the mechanics and trying to figure out how to manipulate them to get the results. And so it ceases to be fun in the kind of way that the Uncharted games want to be fun, and it becomes a different kind of experience.
Huh.
So difficulty becomes an engine of analytical thought at that point, because you have to take apart the game in order to beat it at that level.
Yes, exactly.
So
Fascinating. I mean, I also like getting good at games, but I don't think I've ever quite reached that point. I've never had that specific relationship with a game before, at least as far as I can think. Because I fail to see the appeal. For me, the point when you're good at a game is the point when you're playing it fluently and maximizing what those mechanics were going for, rather than doing what you just described. You know what I mean?
Do you mean maximizing in the sense of using those mechanics to tie the interactive and the narrative element together, or wait?
Yeah, in a way,
you play a lot of
choreographing
puzzle
it.
games, though.
Yeah, I do play puzzle games. I'm not very good at them.
Okay. No, I didn't mean though as a way of like challenging or contrasting that, but I was just thinking like getting good at a game might mean something different if like you're.
Puzzle games are a whole different ball game when it comes to getting good at them. Definitely, I think the only way to get really good at a puzzle game is to do what you're talking about here. But like when it comes to action games, you know, like for me the sweet spot is right when you're having a tough time and you need to think and strategize and all that. And to some degree that involves like figuring out what the mechanics involve, but you're not taking it so far that the reality that the game is presenting collapses, you know.
What is I'm curious, what in your frame of reference is a kind of game that you've had that kind of experience with, where you've hit that sweet spot and taken away that sweet spot from the experience?
For whatever reason, the first thing that's coming to my mind right now, well, actually, Destiny is one. Like, I guess I tend toward shooter games where you have supernatural powers when it comes to reaching for that, I suppose, because that, to me, that feels like you have a bunch of different tools. Oh my god, I'm taking this way too fast. Like, clearly I'm not very good at tricks, but for me, like, the supernatural powers in a game like Destiny or I Divine Subermancy or Dishonored, you know, like those are the kinds of tools that I like to play with, like things that let you have to contend with the level design, but also you have to like there's an extra layer there where you can work hard to do things in a way that feel like, you know, maybe that's how it would have been done if a film director had planned this sequence out, you know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
What we're talking about is fluency and elegance.
Yeah. The
possibility of elegance within this contrived space, which, you know, I think is a relatively recent development or a relatively recent possibility in video game history.
Yeah, it's true enough.
But yeah, the idea of being good enough at a game to allow the game to celebrate itself, as it were, and to get the most, and to get the flow state out of it, the best flow state that it can provide.
What is there kind of like a hinge point or a click point? Like when you mentioned that that's something that kind of fluency where the game can sort of celebrate itself and reach that sort of where all parts of it support itself in the experience. Is there like a point in game development where you think that sort of became more likely or more frequent, or like a generation?
I think that you know, I think that like there were I think there were definitely games that were capable of delivering that kind of experience as far back as my childhood, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
But it was much more like the product of a...
Oh, god damn it. I'm fine. I didn't miss the house fight.
Yes. I think that it was much more the product of contending with limitation at that point.
Yeah. It still is. Is.
But I mean I think that it's become I think that actually like multiplayer gaming has created much more of a possibility for that, like real-time multiplayer gaming across a wide array of opponents. Just because it's of the irreducibility of that experience, relatively speaking.
Right. Yeah.
But you know, like I first really encountered your critical work, James, in that playthrough of, I guess you could call it a speedrun of Metal Gear Solid 2 you did a little while back. Which, for those who haven't seen it, I've shouted it out on this channel before, but it consists of you performing. It's kind of that run is an assemblage, right? It's not actually a fully unbroken run. I think you acknowledged that at some point.
Yes, yeah, and it's funny that you used the phrase "a little while back" because that has kind of a double meaning in that. I recorded that footage in 2006, 2005, 2006.
Yeah.
And that was before I was doing any of the video work I've done since. And I found it on a backup track. I was like, oh my god, thank you, past me. And then I just laid down a commentary track on it.
Yeah.
But yes.
ever since I saw that video, like I've been wrestling with it a little bit, right? Because what you have to say about the game in that video doesn't have, at least it doesn't expressly have a whole lot to do with like things that you would uncover about the game and its narrative by playing it to the point of exhaustion that you clearly have. But watching you, like, you know, totally dominate the game kind of lends a certain feeling of authority to your analysis. And I've always, like, I've gone back and forth with myself about whether or not that's a kind of false thing for me to take away, you know?
That you interpret his skill at the game as a mark of authority in and of itself.
Right, and that when you talk about what the game's relationship with postmodernism is, like, I feel inclined to take you a little bit more seriously because, look, clearly he's thought about this game, like, a lot.
Well, it's funny, because, well, two things. One, I don't know if that's a false thing to take away from it either, and two, that is exactly the effect that I strive for. It's like when I'm putting it together, I'm like, oh man, I totally know the effect I'm going for by wanting to talk about this on a high level while also just like blistering these enemies. Does this? It's kind of there's kind of an element of showmanship, but also a tacit demonstration of familiarity.
Yeah.
And well, tacit. That's not really the right modifier there, but yeah, a demonstration of familiarity that. It is. I mean, it is where the sort of the criticism intersects with spectacle,
right?
And I feel like for all that spectacle does not contribute to critical thought, it does contribute to a kind of experience in that particular environment. Like, like for example. A good comparison would be most of the stuff, like most of the underlying ideas that were in that Metal Gear Solid 2 video were expressed in an essay that I wrote also back in 2006, 2007 called "Driving Off the Map," and that is it's a piece of writing. It's a text with screenshot visuals to illustrate it, and that's a different kind of. It's a different medium, and it's like the content, the authority of the argument rests in the language, whereas in a video format, the authority it can rest upon the performance that's involved as well, whether or not that however little that actually contributes to the quality of the critical thought.
Yeah. I mean, it's also a way to shut down a particular line of criticism that you're likely to get if you critique any of the sort of social or thematic elements of a video game, which is the immediate assumption that you are an outsider,
right?
Because you're using tools that outsiders use to pick apart video games, per this line of questioning, and by demonstrating that you are good at video games, you become a different kind of critic at that point, an insider critic, and therefore liable to get your voice heard places where you might not otherwise.
Yes, yeah, that is, and there's also, that doesn't necessarily, how am I going to say this, like, I have to admit that I sort of subject myself to that own standard, I subject myself to that standard as my own as well, is the order of the words that should come out.
Cool. You think that's a valid criterion by which to sort of exclude thinking on this kind of thing, or
no.
But you would prefer to have that credential.
Yeah, well, it's like the standards that I apply to myself are not the standards I expect of others. It's a kind of double standard in a lot of ways, where I actually expect something different of myself in terms of what I'm going to make, and I also recognize that there are parts of things that I do that can be superfluous and removed. But in terms of making like the final thing that I want to make, it's something that is technically something that shows technical prowess, if not mastery, and also that something. It's basically like. The technical prowess or mastery and the performance is this sort of objective, visible thing. You can confirm it by watching it. Whereas the critical side of it, that's much less tangible. That it is either it's easy to equivocate on some points, especially if they're vaguely made or or supported by a theory or an underlying assumption that the other person doesn't agree with. And they're just it's a much harder thing to sort of back up in any kind of authoritative sense. And having that visual there, it provides that. I hate
so
this word, it provides a metric in a way.
It's the feeling of rigor that you're after.
Yes.
That makes sense to me. And, you know, which, of course, is achievable through brute force of language. It's what I try to do sometimes when I'm demolishing people. But yeah, it's really useful to get the sense that you could also own them.
Yeah.
In a variety of fields. Perhaps physically, you know. If I could in some way communicate my, like, overpowering physical charisma through my writing, it would, you know, definitely make me more confident in my opinions about anime.
Yeah, just when you go online, just like flex into the microphone.
I'm doing it right now.
There's also, actually, this kind of connects back to the sort of sweet spot idea before. This was actually something that I've recently finished a video series on No More Heroes.
Yeah.
And I like that game and I've gotten to know it very, very closely. And when you get to know a game very closely, you also find yourself sort of fighting its cracks and its flaws.
Yes.
No More Heroes is a very scrappy game in some ways, where it's like you kill enough enemies and the frame rate like drops to like 3. and I love it. It has that sort of scuffed up denim jeans feel, like right in its very fiber, that I think really supports its character. But this was actually a struggle because when I make a video or something like that, you know, I don't really make critical things about things I don't like.
Right.
There's value to that. I don't mean that criticism. I mean, obviously, criticism should not just all be congratulatory, but the type of criticism that I like to focus on in terms of like putting a lot of energy into is celebratory.
Yeah, revealing the virtue of the thing.
Yeah, and part of that I think is also revealing the virtue of the thing as a played thing, and that's one of the reasons why I tried to make it good, because it's like, it's like. You know, in any kind of improvisational endeavor or any kind of cooperative endeavor, I kind of view it as a cooperation with the game, and even, you know, having some experience on the development side, even a collaboration with the developers, even though they almost certainly never intended many of the things I'm drawing away from it.
Right, and that's what makes it a collaboration.
This is where art exists in the space between artist and viewer.
Yeah, exactly, and it's kind of like it's very weird, because there's a sense of connection that I draw over a series of disconnections. The disconnection being that, especially in the event of a game that's developed by a Japanese developer, it is highly unlikely that they're ever going to see what I'm doing, and it is highly unlikely that, I mean, unless they are also fluent in English and also fluent to the degree that, you know, an abstract literary description is going to be cognizant. It's unlikely that will cross that cultural boundary, and it's also and that it's also even unlikely that you know, I did a thing on The Last of Us, and I really don't expect Naughty Dog to have looked at it.
I mean, I find the prospect of being in actual dialogue with the authors of work that I'm criticizing terrifying and off-putting. So I feel like that's all for the best. I have been there. I am there because a lot, you know. I know that the person who draws Comic X follows my, you know,
your blog, which is named for it,
and reads everything that I write about it, probably, and that has an uncomfortable and like unescapable impact upon
the writing,
particularly like the tone that I take. You know.
Do you find yourself feeling like, how does that influence the tone, or how does that impact it rather?
I will not go for what is one of my favorite tricks, which is breathtaking rudeness in an effort to sort of clear the decks and get a new conversation started. You know?
Right.
I have to instead come around to what I feel are both what I feel are the strength and what I feel are the weaknesses of it, in a way that doesn't seem to be immediately dismissing any alternative to my point of view, which then somewhat hampers my ability to project that rigor that we were talking about earlier, that confidence, because I genuinely do not want to have an effect on the work, like even a subconscious effect on the work.
I mean, it puts you. You want to be in the space of criticism, but you end up like kind of uncomfortably close to the space of just workshopping, right?
Yeah,
which is a different mode. You can't.
And that's one that requires one to be invited to participate in it. You know,
right?
It's a very interesting distinction.
I mean, it's also because like when I'm talking about a webcomic, I'm talking about a work that is in progress. Yeah. Right. I'm not talking about a finished thing, which I cannot retroactively change. The finished thing. It's the ability. It's the idea that like, and of course there is the sum of the discourse around a particular item will change that item if it's in progress. Like this is true for episodic television. It's true for all sorts of things. And like I think that vibe and that possibility is always there, even when there's a sort of greater physical separation. But we tend to ignore that. There are like a webcomic like Homestuck, for example, makes that completely transparent, that the author is drawing ideas from the community of thoughts around the work.
Right.
In a way which makes criticizing the work a different kind of process, a different kind of risk that you're taking.
Right.
But yeah, I think it's a very distinct idea than doing something where you feel like your particular take is not zeitgeisty enough and not visible enough to ever actually make it into the ears of the people who are producing the stuff.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. No, I most of the stuff that I criticize is by and large finished. Very little of it's sort of in progress like that, and that I guess I've spent so much time focusing on how to sort of create a relationship through the criticism that I mean it's like you can't really take the coexistence of the creator and the work and your criticism for granted, because there's that gap there, so you have to create it, and that completely sidesteps a whole different set of obstacles that I don't think I've ever appreciated until I heard that.
Yeah. Well, I struggle with it every day. I think that as a general matter, like what I like to think of in the critical process is the creation of new spaces for the art to exist in. If you see what I mean, like if you take the art as an object which is divorced from which just sort of exists as itself. And the sort of the interpretive space around that is large, but only intermittently available to people, right?
Which is so much more robust a way of looking at it than what you tend to encounter in like kind of both Metal Gear criticism and Dark Souls criticism, at least in the mainstream, which is like, let's uncover the author's true intentions.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's if you're in the academy, that's already like
of course
been dismantled.
We're in video games. We're not in the academy.
So I mean, I feel like the thing that one strives for when one is doing this is to peel back the rind of that interpretive space and be like, check this part of it out that you haven't seen. Check this part of it out. The art actually exists here and here and here and here and here.
Yeah.
And
not necessarily all at the same time.
If you follow me, you can see that. You don't necessarily need to live there, but you can see it. And when you come out, you can have a larger idea of what space this thing occupies culturally and thematically, and in terms of the way it works and the way one responds to it.
Well, that touches on something that I would really actually enjoy just hearing your take on. Excuse me. I have ample familiar with the Academy. I mean, I got an MA in English, and I've done my share of criticism and literary research.
Yeah.
And of course, have been familiar with many friends who were in the PhD program. It was not the MA and PhD programs were not really separated. Many of us, we shared many of the same classes, as I think is common. But
I got a BA in Japan, so you're way ahead of me.
But yeah, it's like there is a sense of comfort and authority once something is published and praised, that you can sort of rest on. There's kind of an objective sense of having arrived when your criticism is accepted for publication. And with video game stuff, even though there is to a degree a gatekeeping that exists in publishing outlets, there's always a sort of nebulous question of legitimacy and authority, and which I think the performance aspect touches upon, but I don't know.
Well,
What did you take on that contrast?
Do you want me to go first and then you, Josh?
I didn't really.
Oh, maybe
I didn't really follow.
Maybe
Yeah.
the it'll be revealed in
Yes,
my
go
answer to
for it.
We are in that Wild West place, and the evidence that we're in that Wild West place is that there was an active cultural war around who gets to speak about video games.
Ouch. I messed up.
Like, very recently, it's very much in contention who the standard bearers of that authority will be, and like I see this as part of a larger change in the culture where it's partially because video games are a new medium, but partially because everything is being demediated. Everything is being publicly curated instead of privately curated.
Yeah.
Right.
Including truth. And the
Yes. Seems to be.
yeah, and like I've always been a big booster of that. I've always felt that the sort of destabilizing element that the internet and the fact that everybody can form their own canon based upon their own lived experience in the communities that they're a part of.
Okay. No parking thing. Oh wait, where do you need it? Where do you need it?
Hold on. There's a new mechanic which we have not yet encountered.
I switched that off.
I
switched that off in
Me
America.
too.
I didn't realize they added that.
All right. This is good because it allows Josh to park while I try to finish.
We've accidentally made this a short one, but maybe this will.
This might
cancel
prolong
that
it a little bit. Yeah, I thought that like 10 hours was a little bit on the short side, but anyway, we're seeing that this is that there is a danger to this, right? That the possibility of no extra credence being given to, say, people who can obviously think straight and have done the research and like are putting things forward in a way that is both meant to be rigorous in a display fashion and also is actually rigorous. We're beginning to see that there are drawbacks to the crumbling of our institutions. Yeah, but I
want you to continue that, but I just want to point out, holy God, rigorous in execution. I cannot do that for the life of me. Hell yeah.
You mean what I just did? That was
Yes!
a sloppy. That was a sloppy job, and I'm surprised it counted. We need another 10 minutes here. Shall we just tack on another 150 miles? Is that?
Yeah. I think so.
Please.
So
More vinegar. I'm sorry. Please. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
that's fine. But basically, my take on it is currently evolving. But I mean, like everything else, it's a balance, of course. But I think that as a general matter, the places that I like to occupy, the voices that I like to hear, are voices that under a different sort of more academic setting would be completely invisible. Like I like zeal. I like what's the actual name of the publication that I'm thinking of?
Something in the vein of zeal. I don't know.
Yeah, never mind. But like, I like zeal. I like those communities. I like those voices. I like that they are
Critical distance, is that what you're going for?
Because
we're having a conversation here, which is kind of unfashionable in the critical distance world. This whole notion that skill at video games, like the very notion of video games as a literacy, is something I hear
Really?
kind of questioned a lot. Yeah. I've never fully grasped it myself, but
Do you want to expand on that since I ran out of steam there?
You did? Oh no, I didn't.
Well-
I didn't intend to pick up any. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, James.
Oh no, he said that Isaac said that he ran out of steam, but I wanted to confirm that I picked up his point, and I agree.
Right.
I agree with that sort of overview of the current sort of situation.
Right. And yeah, and I think in the end I'm down for all this. Like, to bring it all the way back around to being good at video games, and like, no, I don't think it's. I'm gonna really simplify everything that's just been said, but like, just to address that question really simply, like, is it important to be good at video games, to have a critical take on video games? No, but being good at them will open you up to certain kinds of takes that you wouldn't have had otherwise, and it makes it more likely for you to spend a lot of time, like, essentially reading and rereading the text, you know, if you're making it your goal to engage with it on its most unforgiving terms. And I think it would be wrong to overlook the potential value in that.
Second question, does having an MA in English make you better at writing about video games?
Yeah, that's a question.
I feel
Oh, shit.
that. Oh no! Oh no! Oh god!
I'm out of here. I'm out of here.
For video games.
Route changed. Oh man. I am going to say the having of the MA does not make me better, but the rigor and seriousness with which I have taken the work that goes into it does. Honestly, it's like my background, which I call it my background, even though it has developed in many ways alongside of video game criticism and interest in it, is poetry.
Yeah.
Which, boy, you want to talk about something subject to suspicion. The closer you get to what's perceived as high or fine, or, well, I say high or fine arts, but I think I really mean exclusive arts or intimidating arts. I mean, heck, even when, to kind of briefly describe my MA, I was in an MA for English program. It was actually an emphasis on creative writing, but it was at the University of Southern Mississippi, and it has an MA program that has a creative writing emphasis, which I chose over an MFA because an MA is taken more seriously if you want to sort of transport it outside of an academic context. And so there was a little bit of strategy there, but it's like even among the folks who were strictly literature, like they did not want to deal with poetry, especially when we were looking at periods where poetry was the dominant means of literary expression. They would try to find something that was prose and focus on that, and I was always very surprised by that. And I bring that up to sort of explain exactly how intimidating poetry appears to be for a lot of people, even folks who, kind of make their home in that general neighborhood. And that, of course, not to say that everybody who's a literary PhD or MA is intimidated by poetry. That's just anecdotal observation. But
I've got a BFA in creative writing, and I struggle to say with any confidence whether a poem is bad or good most of the time.
I have no credentials in this department, and I'm absolutely certain whether a poem is bad or good.
The confidence, in a weird way, I think that confidence actually helps strengthen criticism, because it's like you have a conclusion in mind, and sometimes exploratory writing is useful.
Sure.
But in terms of writing a really impactful assessment, I mean, the reader's probably going to know that they have their own response to it and can formulate it in similar rational terms. And knowing that you're there to sort of reinforce or enforce the validity of your opinion by the strength of your conviction, I think makes criticism stronger.
Definitely. I think everybody here is down with the take that the main thing about criticism is making a strong case for whatever your interaction with the art was. But poetry in particular, you read it a lot of the time. At least if you're me, you read it a lot of the time and your main reaction is, huh.
Yeah.
Hard to penetrate.
So, but I mean, we're talking about poetry. Poetry is a thing which has the thing that happened to poetry is the thing which happens a lot to these exclusive arts, which is that it, of course, does not remain the realm of the exclusive. It splits off in two directions. On one hand, it becomes increasingly highfalutin. On the other hand, it becomes increasingly the sole domain of pop culture.
Yes.
And so you see slam poetry, battle rapping, sort of lyricism in general becoming like the province of a particular underclass almost.
But at the same time, you see the elites of poetry like referencing the canon and like making out as though the depth with which you can refer to your knowledge of history of poetry within your poetry is like the main gauge of how serious a poet you are.
I mean, that's like a century old as a concept.
Yeah,
I mean, that's Eliot.
Of course, but
Yeah.
it continues to spiral.
I mean, they're aware of how hidebound and highfalutin they are, but there is no pressure to be any less highfalutin because the only space in which they operate is a space that is occupied by maybe at most 80 people in the entire
Right.
fucking country.
Yeah.
It's so it's like, I would like to see, and then one of the great to haul this around to video games again.
Yes,
one of the things
have to do it.
One of the things that I like about the current state of video games that there are no barriers in that way right now.
It's true.
Are like very few of them for the most part. Video games are it is generally not considered that a particular video game will be too highfalutin for you to play, that it will be the wrong cultural, object for you in some way. Like maybe a Civilization game is going to like be a little forbidding in that point, but I feel like there is the barrier to entry as a video game is whether you think you can play video games or not, and that's it. And
Right.
I find that that's exciting to
Yeah.
me on some level.
Of course, in saying that, you're disagreeing with those who, as we've talked about before, complained when Hyper Light Drifter came out that this game felt inaccessible to them because
of the challenge.
Because of the challenge. Yes.
I did say that was the one thing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but the way you put it right was whether they think they can do it. Or am I misconstruing you here?
I mean, the physical skill necessary to play a video game is a real thing.
Sure.
The challenge of coordination and of having come up with video games or not come up with video games, having been brought up with it. I mean, there is an economic aspect to that, or was. There really isn't anymore.
Sure.
But I think that what we came around to there was that it's a. I mean, I'm not going to dispute that it's a barrier to entry, but it's a barrier to entry that is on a completely different axis than any of the barriers to entry that apply to a thing like poetry or symphonic music.
Yeah.
Or it's. I think that being good at video games is equally accessible to a wide range of not all people again, and I am sorry about the way that it excludes some people because it definitely does, but. It's just intriguing to me that it cuts across cultural lines in a very different way, particularly now that it's become more of a normal thing for like women to play video games and things like that.
Sure. I feel like we might have interrupted a train of thought you were on there, James.
Oh no, I interrupt my own trains of thought all the time.
Great.
I'm often grateful.
Grateful.
I'm often a
Nathan. Josh. What? Isaac.
I interrupt my own words, spoonerisms all the time. Anyway, yeah, I find that, and to kind of bounce off the point that was being made in terms of the general area of poetry. One of the things that I do come from a background of is exclusivity, and that's one of the things that, in a way, it's kind of like what audience? Who is your audience? Which is one of the number one questions that gets answered over the course of writing, and it sort of lays bare what is implicit in terms of the priorities and who the author cares about. And there are a handful of people who were some of my best audiences when I was younger, and those people tended to be teachers and peers who were also of a similar literary creating bent. And those are the people who I write for. I mean, a man who I regard as my poetic mentor, a man named Stephen Gardner, at my undergrad university, the second one of them, a lot of the times when I'm writing criticism, I think like, were Gardner of my generation, and had he somehow his experiences, education, and critical faculties, is this something that he could respect? And he's a highly educated man, very literary, and I mean he gave me my sea legs in that front, and so and so there is kind of an exclusivity there, because I am aiming for what might be considered a non-popular audience, because there's an academic base there, and there's an academic sensibility that I've internalized that I'm seeking to satisfy. And this actually does come back around to being good at video games.
Yes.
Surprise. But
I'm giving Josh
it
a
all
high
comes
five,
back
which
to
he
video
cannot-
games.
which he cannot respond to because he's currently driving a truck.
He patted my back and said it was. There you go, Josh. It's all video games.
Anyway, please
go
continue.
On, go on.
honk once for agree, honk twice for disagree.
You remember where the honk button is bound?
I think I'm honking. I honked a total of 3 times, so take that however you want.
Oh no, I appreciate the ambiguity. But yeah, it comes back around to being good at video games, because when you are good at video games, particularly in a critical capacity, that's an exclusivity that I think makes many people uncomfortable, yet also welcomes in other people who would be, as I believe Isaac mentioned earlier on, other people who would be suspicious of what I would consider a creative act. It gives them a place where they feel welcome. Like, okay, this is somebody who's talking about something that I'm familiar with in a way that I'm unfamiliar. But here's an aspect of this that I am very familiar with, so I have a point. And simultaneously, I think that there are some folks who enter a critical sort of engagement like that from the mechanical point of view, from the point of view of appreciating a game as a fun, playable thing, and who also do want to see it elevated to a point of exclusivity in a similar vein as an academic writing. I mean, they want it, it's that whole Roger Ebert thing, games are not art. People want the legitimacy and respect, and so they look for the patterns that signify legitimacy and respect in other media. And so it's like there's kind of this motion from, okay, I'm starting from a point of view of I enjoy video games. Here's somebody who clearly enjoys video games enough to be good at them. Oh wait, they're talking about video games in this way that reaches the level of respect and prestige that I would like to have access to. And I think that's not the only flow, but that is a flow of a certain audience that I've noticed over the years.
Yeah, I mean, it's like there's a part of me that is like that. This is a pattern worth preserving. This is a way of living worth preserving right here. This passing down of legitimacy from mentor to mentee, and the keeping of high standards. To the extent that they are subjective or objective, we can bracket that, but at least the passing down of standards of critical acumen. And then there's another part of me which is just like, well, fuck your club if I'm not part of it.
Right.
I'm happy to see people whose first instinct is to burn the motherfucker down also.
It takes all kinds.
Once again,
one
balance
strengthens the other.
Yeah, a balance should be struck.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
But that's, I hadn't thought about it that way before. That demonstrating technical prowess at the video game might actually make an analysis more accessible to those with a more conventional, if it's not too unfair to say conventional, approach to the form. That makes sense. That's a good takeaway.
So the culture gives us a certain amount of, there are only so many signifiers of authority left intact. You might as well try to reach for those.
Whoa,
and
buddy!
Not to sideswipe the Bolt bus, ideally.
I narrowly avoided it.
That bus seems to have sideswiped you.
Yeah.
Oh man, apparently they think that a cargo of passengers is equivalent to a truck full of vinegar. I guess it depends on how contentious the
Everyone's going to end up
what
in a
did we have in
pickle
this
at the
one
end
again?
of that.
Office paper.
Yeah. Office paper?
Yeah.
The joke doesn't work at that point.
I'm gonna write all my takes on Venom Snake and how he's the best.
Oh
of
yeah,
the
we didn't
snakes. I'm
get around.
I'm gonna write them down on all this office
that.
paper. A truck full of office papers worth of writing on Venom Snake, undelivered.
I want to know very much your thoughts on Venom Snake.
Well, maybe we could cram it into the last couple minutes here.
Drive very slowly, Josh. I thankfully have no thoughts on Venom Snake, so it'll take about half the time.
Just limit yourself to the number of words Venom Snake uses in Metal Gear Solid 5.
I think Venom Snake is very good. Like Isaac and I are hella on the record as believing that silent protagonists in video games are still characters, right? Like they're defined by their experiences and by the narrative themes of the world around them. Because if you want to attribute those themes to any consciousness in the game, it has to be that of the playable character, right? That's the school of Spec Ops talking again. And Venom Snake I think he's so misread. Like people. Okay, here we go. Where do you need it? Where? Oh, it's not even asking me. Oh, hold on. Tell me what to do.
You missed the little green
I have
square.
to stop there. Okay, I guess the explanation.
It's the same as any other little green square in this
I must
game.
be speaking to a little man who will offer to park my truck for me if need be. Okay. Where do you need it? That looks easy.
All right.
But anyway, like,
That looks easy.
yeah, we'll find out. I'm gonna have to do a full 360 here.
I'm looking forward to seeing this.
But anyway, people talk about Venom Snake as a cipher, right? Like, the assumption seems to go that what that game is saying is that the player is Big Boss, because it opens with a character creation, which
Right.
seems to make people think that you're like making the character, you're modeling him after yourself, which in this case only works if you're a dude, which is a little unfortunate. But my approach to that was more like, okay, so I'll make this look like Snake plus a few years plus some rushed plastic surgery, because that's the scenario. But that turned out to be a red herring, and Venom Snake is in fact a stooge, and that's all great. But to me, he embodies a kind of the same archetype that Max Rockatansky does in Fury Road, which is this kind of degraded action hero, like who unlike many 80s action heroes, who's always been the model for the Snakes, like bears the weight of his trauma. And that's good and all, but I don't know. I'm trying to rush this out right now, so I may have to save some of this for another time, but overall, Venom Snake is cuddly, and he's the truest hero of all the snakes. Do you agree?
I agree. He is the second Snake I have ever seen fucking smile.
It comes like at such a late moment in the game, right? That smile. Are we talking about is that the one where after he dances with Quiet in the rain?
Oh no, there are other points where he smiles. Like if you get like the happy birthday scene, it's like he's like smiling with all of his friends around, and it's like I mean, the only other time that I can recall seeing a Snake smile is at the beginning of Metal Gear Solid 3 when Naked Snake, the future Big Boss, is like eyeing a hornet's nest over a soldier, and he's like, "Oh, this is gonna be good," and it's like he's got that sort of mischievous sort of grin, but it's like even that's still kind of it's a little bit of there's a little bit of I don't know, not quite friendly. And that's one of the things about Venom that I do like, is that there's a level on which he really seems to be a friendly person, and I have difficulty reconciling the overt revenge theme with that.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that he's been forced into that narrative. That's the whole thing, right? Like, the main theme of that game does not seem to be, as other people receive it, like the Big Boss narrative being inherited by the players, but rather this poor stooge being robbed of his identity and forced into that narrative. And that makes him so sympathetic to me. And, like, you know, if you read it of a piece, if you read it as of a piece with, like, Metal Gear Solid 2's kind of caution about simulation, and Metal Gear Solid 4's kind of explicit fuck video games,
right.
Like, it's hard for me to read Venom Snake's situation as one that's meant to be positive for the world. I mean, for God's sake, if we like taking the silent video game protagonists and reading his thoughts and feelings as being made apparent by the themes of the world around him, then Venom Snake is, really depressed.
Yes.
And I don't know, but at the same time, like, every Snake has always been like the 80s action hero archetype, and Venom Snake is the only one who gets a game that's set in the 80s, which makes him in a way the kind of the true Snake,
Yeah.
I don't know, and I think there's a lot there, but we do have to wrap this up now.
Yeah.
Same.
Anyway, good chatting with you, James. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me on. I've loved you guys' show, and I'm honored to be on it.
I really appreciate that, and thanks for being the first person to call me good at parking a truck.
God, that is true. All right. Thank you for bringing a veneer of legitimacy to our little operation. And safe travels.
Yeah.
You too.
So long.